All the characters in the story are over 18 years old. George Harris was terribly disappointed when he found out that he would have to leave town on business on the third Friday in June. In fact, the meetings at the regional office of the company were supposed to take place over the weekend. He knew that his wife Gloria would also be disappointed if he somehow couldn't cancel the trip. He desperately tried to get the meetings at the regional office postponed, but his efforts were somewhat hampered by the fact that he could not just tell his company about the preliminary plans that he and his wife had for Friday evening. In the end, he was forced to tell Gloria that their plans would have to be canceled. She seemed completely discouraged by the bad news. The Harrises haven't missed the annual summer solstice party at the club since they joined the club a few years ago, and they've been looking forward to it for months every year. The 30-40 Couples Club got its name because of one of its rules, which concerned the age of the participating couples. To be invited to join, a couple had to have lived together for some time, married or otherwise devoted to each other, and at least one member of each couple had to be in the age range of 30 to 40 years. The stated goal of the club was to provide a social outlet for sociable and free-spirited couples, people who enjoy daring flirting without the risk, fuss, and pressure of secret affairs or noisy get-togethers. The participants liked the fact that their spouses, by virtue of their constant participation in the club, fully approved and encouraged the activities of the club. After all, their spouses were always there too, playing the same games, in the same room or in the next room, but with other participants. The annual summer solstice party has always been the most spectacular and mischievous event on the club's calendar. But George and Gloria won't be part of the fun this year. On that special Friday night in June, Gloria will be alone at home, while George will be alone in his remote hotel room. Gloria's appearance at a party with a random companion as a beau would be contrary to the intentions of the club. She wouldn't want to do it anyway, even if she could come up with a suitable low-key partner for such an event, which she couldn't do. And then Sally called her. Sally and her husband Roger enjoyed playing games with George and Gloria at several recent meetings and did not hide the fact that they would love the opportunity to jump into bed with them. If George and Roger wanted to take part in the fun, fine, but Sally had her eye on Gloria. It was Sally that George wanted to use in the near future, and Gloria had no problem with that. Sally called to ask Gloria to come to the party to have the fun Sally wanted. And when she found out that George and Gloria wouldn't be able to come to the party, she was just as depressed as Gloria. But not for long. Sally wasn't going to give up her plans for Gloria so easily. She said she would call back. Sally actually called back. The very next day. "I found a solution to your problem," Sally exclaimed happily, knowing full well that this was actually her own problem that she intended to solve. "Oh, good," Gloria replied. The skepticism in her words was quite obvious. "And what could it be?" "David can go with you as your date for the evening." "David?" Gloria asked a little uncertainly. "Which David?" "Your David, silly," Sally laughed. "How many Davids have you had in your life, honey?" Gloria laughed out loud. "No way. My David doesn't even know that the club exists, and I don't think I'd want him to be at the party, even if he ever finds out about it. And he would never agree to go to any party as my partner, in any case." "Why not, honey?" Sally asked. "He would have a lot of fun there, and you could spend some time with me. Besides, he's already agreed to go on a date with you." And then the meaning of Sally's last words hit her. "What did he do?" Gloria gasped, almost choking on the coffee she was sipping. "I've already talked to David about this," Sally said casually. "He knows about this club. Well, at least now he knows. Of course, I had to promise to give him some of my time too. He seemed impatient to take advantage of this offer. You had no right to tell David about our participation in the club, and George would never agree with such a crazy idea. You're both going to have a great time, and George should be happy that you're going to the party. I've already left a message on George's answering machine at his office explaining all this. I'll see David at the party, honey. David's supposed to pick you up around 7 in the morning. I know you're going to wear something beautiful. You always look quite edible. Bye." Gloria hung up the phone, feeling slightly dizzy, and sank into an armchair to catch her breath. Sally seemed to move through life at a faster pace than everyone else, and talking to her always made Gloria feel like a whirlwind had just passed and she was struggling to get back on her feet. Gloria really wanted to go to the party, but with David? With David? Gloria thought she should call George, And then she thought she should call David, and then she realized she didn't know what she would say to both of them. Sally seemed to have organized their lives so effectively that further action seemed pointless, or at least unnecessary. Gloria didn't know whether to be angry at Sally for interfering in her affairs so unceremoniously, or to admire Sally's ability to manipulate people. It was crazy. First of all, David was only 21 years old. And secondly, he was Gloria's son. As soon as George got home from work, Gloria took out a jug of dry martini and sat on the couch next to her husband to talk about Sally. And about David. The jug was no longer quite full. Gloria tried it more than once, waiting for George's arrival. They had a lot to talk about, and it wasn't going to be easy. By this time, they both had several hours to think about the measures that Sally had so cleverly taken on their behalf, and yet neither of them knew exactly what to say. George hugged his wife to assure her that they would handle this situation together and that he wanted her to be okay, no matter how things turned out. Gloria began by telling George that none of this was her idea and that Sally only told her the details of it after her connivance had already taken place. In response, George said that he, too, was completely overwhelmed by all this. David knows about us and the club now, Gloria said. I think our son can handle this discovery, Glo. I think Sally wants to get her hands on David herself. Maybe, but we both know that Sally is drooling in your direction. Maybe, but you're drooling over Sally. They understood each other so well. What would people say if I showed up at a party with my son? Gloria asked. I've been thinking about it, George said. Look at it this way. David will be there as your chauffeur, nothing more. He'll take you to the party, and later he'll take you back home. Sometimes that's exactly what happens when you and I go to a club. He's not there to play games with you, but you are with him. At a party, you can go in different directions. You don't have to keep an eye on him, and he'll have a lot of distractions to keep him apart from you. He's old enough to take care of himself. You sound like you approve of it, Gloria said, staring at her husband as if he were as crazy as Sally. I think you'll both have a good time at the party, George said matter-of-factly. You know, I'm going to feel bad that you can't be there. I'll be glad you can be there, George replied. And you'll be doing David a great favor by taking him with you. He'll jump at the chance to fool around with these women from the club, and they always like to fool around with newbies. It's a man's thing, isn't it? Gloria laughed. You just see it as something you would have liked to do when you were David's age. You might want to make sure David isn't around if you're having a heated relationship with Sally, George said, ignoring Gloria's comment. That's a good plan, Gloria giggled. But we're not going to play with her while you're gone. I know you will want to be present and be a part of the events. George's tone became serious. I want you to feel relaxed and comfortable in David's presence. I want him to see how much you like what you and I are doing at the club. I want you to have a good time, and I want David to see that you're having a good time. This means that you will have to let go of yourself and be as playful with others as usual, and let him be as playful as he wants. Gloria looked at her husband for a long time. She saw that he meant exactly what he said, and she wondered if he had thought about the possibility that David might want to play with his mother. She's certainly been thinking about it for the last couple of hours. The thought alarmed her. She alarmed her by how much it intrigued her. George kissed his wife goodbye before getting out to a taxi from the airport, idling quietly in the driveway. He reminded her that he wanted her and David to have a good time at the party. Call me at the hotel when you get home, darling, no matter how late it is, he said. You can tell me how well our son behaved. Or better yet, how well he behaved. You told me not to look after him like a mother hen, she laughed. Just watch him from a respectful distance, he said. That's what cool chickens do. One last hug, and then the taxi disappeared around the corner, and George was gone for 4 days. And for 3 nights, the first of which will be the night of the party. Gloria thought it would be fun to spy on David from a distance as he played with the club's most promiscuous predatory ladies. But what if David was the one who was spying on her? And what if one of the club's games leads to the fact that they both find themselves in an unacceptable situation? Should she talk to David about this before the party, so that they both know where the boundaries between mother and son should be drawn just for this one evening? Where would she want to draw the boundaries when it came to her own son? What if David had no boundaries, even when it came to his own mother? Hey, this is just going to be another club party, she told herself for the 100th time. It's just a few hours of harmless fun. David and I are going to be fine. Sally told me to wear something pretty, she thought aloud. Although she's not my match. David? Yes. What would David like me to wear? She decided to go ahead and wear the dress she had bought a few weeks earlier, the dress she had planned to wear for the first time to a party. When she tried it on at the store, she knew George would love to see it on her. She hoped David would like it as much as she liked him. David showed up just in time. Gloria was ready and greeted him at the door with a warm hug. George was used to waiting patiently, no matter how long it took her to prepare for such cases, and it always seemed to him that it took longer than it should. But she didn't want David to have to wait for her to finish her preparations for the evening. She hoped George would never find out that she could actually be ready for a certain time if she wanted to. Gloria was wearing a dress she had recently bought. It was a bright red dress. David was perfectly dressed for a party at the end of June, and Gloria suggested that Sally might have given him some advice on that. He was wearing a white turtleneck sweatshirt, crisp white trousers, and a navy blazer. And, as if that didn't give him enough of a nautical look, he was wearing white canvas shoes. He looked great, and he knew enough not to wear one of those stupid captain's caps. If Gloria hadn't known him better, she would have jumped to the conclusion that the handsome young man in her hallway was an eligible bachelor from a very old wealthy family, the perfect companion for her evening. She reminded him that first of all he should be her chauffeur, and that at the party they should both feel free and enjoy the company of anyone they want to spend time with at any time. She warned him that the ladies from the club would be following him from the moment he arrived, and that he might want to make the most of the opportunities provided. But at least tonight, Gloria thought, I'm the one he's going home with. They arrived at the club at the most fashionable time. Not quite on time. Upon arrival, each guest was handed a piece of paper with a 2-digit number. David had no idea what that number meant, and no one gave him an explanation, but his mother accepted hers as if it was something that was done at every meeting. Gloria was immediately greeted by several friends from the club, and they all wanted to be introduced to David. If she had any doubts about the reception her son would receive at the club, they were immediately dispelled. It seemed obvious that David would get all the attention of the sorority members that he could handle, and a little more. Gloria felt both maternal pride and a pang of jealousy about this. She constantly reminded herself of George's admonition. Let him be free and behave the way he wants. Sally ran over to greet them. She gave each of them exactly the same greeting, which included a big hug. If David was interested in the tone of the party, he now knew what to expect next. Gloria took Sally's arrival as a hint to free David for the evening. Music was coming from somewhere. Without waiting for an invitation, Sally moved into David's arms and began to dance slowly with him. Half of the women in the audience lost the thread of the conversation and watched enviously as Sally worked her magic with this hot young stud who was new to the club. David was well relaxed by the time Sally handed him over to another impatient and strikingly beautiful woman. Sally headed towards one of the several men who were lying in wait for her to walk past them. In less than an hour, David danced with several slender, mature women. Refreshing drinks were always available at the bar, mostly snacks. There was also a fruit-based punch that was literally breathtaking, which made the club a good place to meet extremely friendly people. A few guests were just hanging out there, waiting for the more exciting events of the evening to begin. The games finally started. They were designed to get players to work individually or in teams in unusual and exciting ways. As expected, players would sometimes team up against another player only to later compete with each other for survival. Another demanded that couples, working together around the clock, stick notes on the specified body parts. It only took David a minute or two to get into the spirit of every game he took part in, and soon he was having as much fun as everyone else. Gloria and David almost ended up at the games together, but each of them watched closely and encouraged the other when he competed. At one point at the event, which was a variation of the familiar salon game, Twister, Gloria had to lean heavily forward and down over the crouching body of another woman. At that very moment, her eyes met David's, and she felt a blush flood her face when she saw her son staring at her. And not at her face. At least he doesn't know I'm blushing, she thought. A small room off the main party room, dubbed the playroom, was used as a secluded place for any pranks that the participants got up to during the games. Copies of the numbered pieces of paper that had been given to each guest upon arrival now lay mixed up in two cardboard boxes, one for men's rooms, the other for women's. There was something like a wheel of fortune, used to select the tasks that would be assigned to the players whose numbers were drawn. The game began with the fact that one person, chosen at random, entered the game room and waited. The wheel spun. The specified task was announced loud enough for the person in the game room to hear it, and a number was drawn to select the person who would enter the game room and complete the assigned task with the person waiting there. The first participant returned to the main room, and the process was repeated. Each participant entered the game room to complete a task, and then stayed there to receive a visit from another player with another task. The numbers were extracted from two boxes in turn, so that the couple in the game room was always a man and a woman. If a husband and wife ended up in the playroom together, it's a pity. These were breaks in the game. David was grateful that his number had not been played earlier. He had the opportunity to observe the process for a while and get an idea of what it might be like in a game room. It was clear, partly from how long people had been in the playroom and partly from the condition of their clothes when they returned, that the tasks assigned were usually expanded or perhaps even ignored, presumably by mutual agreement reached in the playroom. No one came out of the game room, showing signs of dissatisfaction. When Gloria's number came up, she went to the playroom to join the man. Her eyes met David's as she left the main room, and they exchanged smiles of support and approval. The man soon appeared with a satisfied smile on his face, which David found slightly annoying. She felt that she was ready for almost anything that could be done in the short time allotted for one move in the game room. But no one came into the playroom to join her, at least not right away. Was there any confusion in the drawing of the numbers? Why didn't anyone come to tell her what the delay was? The problem was that David's number had been played. The group immediately began a heated discussion in whispers about whether David should be placed in such a situation with his own mother. Most people thought that the husband/wife rule should apply in this case. David had the distinct impression that although the husband/wife rule often caused amusement or disappointment among the members of the club, the members of the club may find the idea of applying it to a mother/son couple attractive. The fact that the task at hand would not have put too much pressure on either of them also led to the decision to let David and his mother get together. David went to the playroom. The light in the room was somewhat dimmed. There was a sofa there, and Gloria was lying on it. "Hi," she said, trying to make her voice sound confident and restrained. It didn't work out very well. Gloria was used to hearing the continuous stream of obscene remarks exchanged by the group in the main room while the two people in the playroom went about their business. But now she only heard the eerie silence outside. Everyone must be sitting on the edges of their chairs, trying to hear what is being said or done here, she thought. David sat down next to his mother on the sofa. She pulled away from his lips slightly and whispered to him that they would have to stop soon. With obvious reluctance, they sat down again and pulled themselves together. When she left the room, she straightened her dress and tried to put her hair in some kind of order with her hands. She was greeted with applause. She blushed again. Sally gave her a thumbs up. The wheel spun again. Another number fell out, and the woman, who could barely contain her joy at being chosen, burst into the game room. She had no intention of doing only what the assignment required of her. She only had a few precious moments with the handsome young man who was waiting for her, and there was no way she was going to miss her chance with him. It was worth a try. When David came out of the game room a little later, his clothes were a bit in disarray, and he looked like he was in a fight. He was greeted with another round of applause. It was his turn to blush. Sally gave him a thumbs up. Gloria just smiled at him with pride and love in her eyes. The man who entered the game room next had the best 3 minutes of his life. His job was to complete what his partner had almost completed with David, and he was pretty much at her mercy. He made a mental note to thank David later. David and his mother stayed until the very end of the party. They danced the last slow dance of the evening together. Gloria has never felt more peace and contentment than in the arms of her beloved son. And then the party was over. David and Gloria barely spoke to each other on the way home, as if neither of them knew what to say about what had happened between them tonight. They both knew that things would never be the same between them, not even the way they were just a few hours ago. They knew that the events of tonight couldn't just be pushed into the background of their lives and quickly forgotten. But how did it fit in with their ideas of what their relationship should be? Gloria wanted to remember this night as the night when she and her son David became as close as a mother and son could hope to be. But would she be able to resist the urge to repeat her indiscretion tonight? David wanted to remember this night as the night when he and his mother found a way to bring their love to a higher and richer level of physical satisfaction. He wanted this night to be the beginning of something more, and much more, much more. Gloria might have been willing to let him continue this inappropriate display of affection, but she knew she had to call George at his hotel. She asked David to stay until she called, suggesting that George might want to ask him how everything went at the party. David said he would be glad to stay here a little longer before he went home himself. The phone call turned out to be very difficult for Gloria. To begin with, she didn't tell her husband right away that David was still there, and the conversation quickly went in a direction that made it impossible for her to gracefully mention this fact to him later. George wanted to know all the details about how David had behaved in the games, and Gloria didn't feel at all comfortable telling him all about it. George also wanted to know how lucky David was with Sally and the other girls from the club, and Gloria realized that she hadn't really paid much attention to David at the beginning of the evening, when he was pretty much on his own. And finally, to top off Gloria's discomfort and confusion on the phone, David was standing close behind her. Gloria apologized to George for not being able to talk any longer and tried to end the conversation. She came up with some weak excuse for her husband that she was tired and a little tipsy from drinking punch at the party. She knew very well that she was neither one nor the other. David became increasingly demanding in his apparent attempt to break down his mother's resistance. George asked if she was feeling well. She assured him that she was fine and that she would definitely call him in the morning after she had dealt with her need for sleep. George released her, but he felt disappointed, partly because he hadn't learned much about what was going on at the party. Gloria was finally able to put the phone back in its place. She turned to David, angrily telling him that he shouldn't have done what he was doing. She was almost crying from the feeling of losing any control over what was happening. She just gave up. She allowed herself to become welcoming and welcoming. Of course, they shouldn't have done what they were doing, but they both wanted to do it so badly. Sometime later, lying awake, Gloria thought about how she would have handled all this with George. She did not foresee problems with the other members of the club, who knew much more than George about what she and David had shared earlier. And then she thought of Sally. Of course, that's all. She would let Sally climb in with her and George, if necessary, several times, and it would occupy her husband's male mind for a long time. Sally had brought her and David together, albeit in a way that Sally could not have foreseen. And now Gloria felt she could have enlisted Sally's help in giving her the opportunity to be with David regularly. Sally seemed to be the solution to all problems. She hoped David would want to stay here with her for the rest of this weekend. In fact, right here in this bed. In George's bed. "You're a shameless mother, Gloria," she said in a whisper. "But it's so nice."